People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. Simon Sinek imagined a world where people don't simply go to work. They go to fulfill a purpose. Where companies don't fight to sell more products, but to make a difference. And where leaders don't push others to act, they inspire them to move. That's the vision behind Simon Sinek's Start With Why, a timeless book that explains why some people and organizations can inspire loyalty, passion, and progress, while others fade into irrelevance. The origin of why everything begins with a question. Why do some leaders have followers who would do anything for them, while others struggle just to keep attention? Why do some companies build loyal communities, while others compete endlessly on price? Simon Sinek's answer is both simple and profound. They know their WHY. It's not about having the perfect product or the biggest marketing budget. It's about having a cause, a belief, a reason that resonates deeply with others. Because when you start with why, you attract people who believe what you believe. And when people believe, they act not because they have to, but because they want to. The Golden Circle, explains Sinek, introduces the Golden Circle, a model that reveals how the most influential leaders and organizations think, act, and communicate. At the outer ring is WHAT, what you do, the products you sell or the services you provide. The next ring is how you do it, the process or the unique selling point that makes you different. And at the center is WHY, your purpose, your cause, your belief. Most people and companies communicate from the outside in. They start with what and end with why. But truly inspiring leaders and brands like Apple, the Wright Brothers, and Dr. King do the opposite. They communicate from the inside out. They start with why. And that message resonates through everything they say and do. It's not manipulation. It's inspiration. Why matters more than what to think about the difference between inspiration and motivation. Motivation pushes. It's external. It's temporary. Inspiration pulls. It's internal. It lasts. Most companies rely on motivation, discounts, fear, or urgency. But great leaders rely on meaning. They don't just sell what something does. They sell what it stands for. And that's why when Apple launches a product, millions of people line up overnight. Not because they need it, but because it represents something they believe in. People don't buy Apple products to own technology. They buy them to express identity. That's the power of why. The Wright Brothers. A lesson in purpose. Let's go back to 1903. Samuel Pierpont Langley, a well-connected academic, had every advantage. He received a large grant from the U.S. government to invent the first flying machine. He had top scientists, journalists documenting his progress, and the best materials available. And then there were the Wright brothers, Wilbur and Orville. They had no degree, no funding, and no fame. Just a small team of volunteers and an unshakable belief that human flight could change the course of history. They failed again and again, but their purpose kept them going. Each crash taught them something new. And finally, on December 17th, 1903, at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, they made history. While Langley chased recognition, the Wright brothers chased possibility. That's why they succeeded, because those driven by purpose endure failure, while those driven by recognition abandon it at the first setback. Apple, the modern example of why, fast forward to the 1970s, the world of computers was dominated by large corporations. Computers were massive, expensive, and intimidating. Then came Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, two visionaries in a small garage. Wozniak was the engineer, the mind. Jobs was the dreamer, the heart. Together, they believed technology could liberate people, not enslave them. Their mission wasn't to build machines. It was to challenge convention. Jobs often said, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. That's the hard to start with why Apple didn't just build products. It built a philosophy. Their marketing never focused on specs, but on beliefs. They told stories. They appealed to the dreamer inside each of us. That's why when Apple entered new industries, music, phones, entertainment, it didn't feel like expansion. It felt like evolution. Every new Apple product carried the same soul. It challenged, inspired, and invited people to belong. Because Apple doesn't start with what it makes. It starts with why it exists. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Leading with Belief, August 28, 1963, under a blazing sun. Thousands gather at the Lincoln Memorial. They come from every corner of America, black, white, rich, poor, hopeful, and broken. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. steps up to the podium. He doesn't say, "I have a plan." He says, "I have a dream." That's the difference between instruction and inspiration. A plan tells people what to do. A dream tells them why they should do it. Dr. King didn't need ads or algorithms to reach people. He spoke to something deeper, the shared belief that freedom and equality were worth fighting for. And that's what united a movement. He didn't push people to act. He pulled them with a vision of what could be. That's what great leaders do. They don't manipulate behavior. They ignite belief. Manipulation versus inspiration. Sinek makes it clear. There are only two ways to influence human behavior: manipulation or inspiration. Manipulation might work for a single sale, but it never builds trust. It's like sugar, quick energy, but no nutrition. Inspiration, however, builds relationships that last. He shares a moving example from Southwest Airlines after the 911 attacks. As airlines faced bankruptcy, Southwest began receiving handwritten letters and checks from loyal customers. One note read, "You've been good to me for years. Now it's my turn to be good to you." That's not loyalty bought through promotions. That's emotional loyalty born from belief and shared values. It's the same reason soldiers fight for their comrades, not for medals. And why employees stay at companies that respect their mission, not just their paycheck. Why companies lose their way. Many companies start with purpose, but as they grow, they lose sight of it. They begin focused on passion, but end focused on profit. Processes replace purpose. Spreadsheets replace stories. And once that happens, the connection fades. Sinek calls this the split, the point where what the company does no longer reflects why it started. It's why startups feel exciting while corporations often feel lifeless. When a company grows, the founder can't speak to every employee or customer anymore. But if the why is strong enough, it echoes through every level like a megaphone that amplifies belief. That's how Richard Branson built Virgin, or how Elon Musk drives multiple companies at once. Their presence is more than leadership. It's symbolic. They embody the why. When employees believe in that why, they don't need to be managed. They manage themselves. The neuroscience behind why Sinek connects this concept to biology. The outer layer of the brain, the neocortex, is responsible for rational thought and language. It corresponds to what? The inner limbic brain, however, is responsible for feelings, trust, and decision-making. And it corresponds to why. That's why we say things like, "It just feels right." We decide emotionally, then justify rationally. So when a company communicates only what it does, it speaks to the rational brain, and logic doesn't inspire loyalty. But when it communicates why, it speaks to emotion, and emotion moves people. This isn't marketing psychology, it's human nature. What the great leaders have in common, from the Wright Brothers to Dr. King, from Jobs to modern entrepreneurs, the pattern is clear. They all had different missions, different tools, different times in history. But they all began with the same thing, a clear and unwavering why. Great leaders don't create followers, they create other leaders. The outer layer of the brain, the neocortex, is responsible for rational thought and language. It corresponds to what? The inner limbic brain, however, is responsible for feelings, trust, and decision-making. And it corresponds to why. That's why we say things like, "It just feels right." We decide emotionally, then justify rationally. So when a company communicates only what it does, it speaks to the rational brain, and logic doesn't inspire loyalty. But when it communicates why, it speaks to emotion, and emotion moves people. This isn't marketing psychology, it's human nature. What the great leaders have in common, from the Wright Brothers to Dr. King, from Jobs to modern entrepreneurs, the pattern is clear. They all had different missions, different tools, different times in history. But they all began with the same thing, a clear and unwavering why. Great leaders don't create followers, they create other leaders. Because when people act from belief, they don't need to be convinced. They become ambassadors of the cause. That's why movements spread, not because of marketing, but because of meaning. What about you? So, What's your why? Why do you do what you do? Why do you wake up every morning? Why does your company exist beyond profit? It's a hard question, but the most important one. Your liver answer. Because once you know your why, everything changes. Your goals become clearer. Your decisions become simpler. Your message becomes magnetic. And people, customers, partners, and even strangers start to believe in what you believe. That's how revolutions begin. Simon Sinek reminds us that success without purpose is emptiness in disguise. Money, fame, and recognition fade, but meaning endures. The world doesn't need more leaders who chase attention. It needs more leaders who inspire belief. So the next time you face a decision in business or in life, don't start by asking what to do. Ask why it matters. Because the why isn't just a question. It's the heartbeat of every idea worth following. If you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they'll work with their heart. Simon Sinek, if this story inspired you, don't let it stop here. Look around and ask yourself, what's your why? Because every movement, every great idea, every dream that changed the world started with one person who dared to ask that question. If you want to keep exploring the books that shape minds and move hearts, subscribe to Beyond the Mind through books. Every week, we dive into the ideas that redefine leadership, purpose, and the way we live. Remember, inspiration doesn't start with what you do. It starts with why you do it.